You know who doesn't have time for all your newfangled Kislev nonsense is Slade, the legendary memer himself, coming at this Kislev build, which actually doesn't have any of that DLC or new stuff other than newly juiced Little Grom. But yeah, these horse archers immediately getting cornered by massive hordes of squigs and squig hoppers. Yeah, both very fun units, just absolute ball of teeth and legs and angry, which makes them an absolute good time. We've also got the Goblin Air Force here, 4 Doom Diver catapults, and 3 Rock Lobbers, and the Regiment of Renown Rock Lobber as well, which is really strong, actually. A lot of people don't really remember this thing exists, but it does have blinded on contact with its ranged attacks, which is just hilarious. We've also got the most gobbo of all gobbos, the Night Goblin War Boss, diminutive, tiny, and quite strong, especially with the changes to enrage mechanics. This fermented fungi being a little bit more consistent is quite good. He's always been good with that and a hard snare of Tormentor Sword. Also anti-large with Spite of the Bad Moon. It just generally is a lot of fun. Extremely squishy though, so extremely risky. Here we've got these horse archers getting cornered once again. The rest of the Kislev army is armored Kossars and some Kossar spears, with the one Warbear rider, Katarine, on bareback. Get it? Bareback. Anyway, one Ice Guard here. We've also got the Little Grom. Yeah, Little Grom definitely didn't need the buff, but it got it. Yeah, massive damage now. I really, you know, I don't necessarily hate buffing like single entity DPS a lot of the time. Most single entities, I think, maybe could have their DPS buffed a little bit, arguably. A lot. Maybe not most, but a lot. Hard to say. But, Little Grom's missile damage is already pretty decent single target, and like kind of increasing it just makes that even better, which is, I mean, fine. 600 armor piercing damage per shot is a lot. Is a very considerable amount, so I don't know. Was it totally necessary? I don't really think so, but hey, it's there, so yeah, we can see the artillery just absolutely pounding away, though. As good as Little Grom is with those buffs, absolutely cannot stand against overwhelming volume of fire from the goblins here. Now, High Arc of Fire, too, allows the Doom Divers to fire pretty well, like up and over slopes and obstructions. You get fairly accurate shots on target. And, again, with this volume, especially with how bunched up a lot of these Kislev units are, it's kind of in a lot of square formations, they are just absolutely taking a beating. That said, I mean, the actual meat of this Greenskins build, there isn't any, to be honest. There isn't any infantry at all. All these squigs, which are going to be decent, but the Warbear Riders certainly have their work cut out for them. Slade's immediately going to swarm the Bear Riders with the squigs, try and just surround them and bog them down. We do see a cast, though, from Katarine. No, looks like she can actually canceled out of that, but yeah, no caster for Slade. Guess when you're that much of a Chad, you don't need a caster, but yeah, the Squig Hopper is also nice mass and good disruption on the initial charge, but they definitely will struggle against the Kossars due to their decent stats, yeah, especially the Kossar Spears, but Ice Scar's also firing in a bit there to Frostbite, maybe a little bit of friendly fire from the Doom Divers and other sources. And the line troops of Kislev are taking an absolute pounding, but Katarine is quite a competent character on her bear. Also, the Warbear Riders themselves are what they always have been, which is very good. So, yeah, Kislev's honestly in a pretty decent place right now. Even seeing how well some of these old school builds perform definitely gives me hope that it's not just... I mean, they're not totally reliant on their DLC. Like, for whatever reason, you do want to play Kislev multiplayer and you don't have the DLC, maybe you can't afford it, or you just choose not to buy it for whatever reasons. I understand. I mean, you can still use Kislev very effectively, and especially once Katarine's chariot gets fixed, the sled is, you know, usable in multiplayer, because it's not going to be completely broken OP in the future. That is also a free LC, so pretty nice. No Nuriska, which I certainly appreciate in this matchup. From a Greenskins perspective, it does mean that the Night Goblin War Boss will be able to use his abilities somewhat here. Looks like he did kind of miss getting Ice Sheeted and Frostbitten down as he pursues the Warbear Riders to try and stop them from just running rampant all over the rest of the artillery here. Squig Herds also suffering. Squig Herds and Squig Hoppers starting to take a lot of damage. Not the tankiest units in the world. They have pretty low HP overall. So definitely not the most staying power, but certainly can get some work done moving in on those Ice Glaives. Ice Glaives will be pretty decent, obviously, against them as well, obviously with the anti-large. That little fungi there, and standard ground also being popped to counteract the melee defense component, at least not counteract it, but rather fermented fungi counteracts her own buff. But anyway, yeah, Spider the Bound Moon active. Unfortunately, Night Goblin War Boss didn't get any more damage. Arguably should have maybe stayed on Katarine for the duration of that uptime, but I understand kind of just sweeping out here, trying to take out some of these other targets, especially that little Grom. It's definitely going to be dangerous into the late game. Or Night Goblin himself. Got a few Squig Bros in combat here, slashing away with their little daggers. He gets in here with his spear. And very small, I have to say, one of the smallest mounted characters in the game. Maybe the smallest mounted character in the game. But nonetheless effective, especially with that armor-piercing damage. Excuse me. Nurgle is afflicting me with something here. But anyway, yeah, decent armor-piercing damage. 400 weapon strength overall is pretty solid. Better than a lot of elf characters, to be honest, which is kind of hilarious. But anyway, yeah, some of these Doom Diver catapults trying to maneuver their artillery pieces out and away from the Warbear Riders. Some of the other crews just kind of hanging around now, waiting for an opportunity to come back, get remounted on that artillery. But let's see here. Yeah, Slade getting his charge bonus active once again. A little bit of cycle charge on that Little Grom once again. Squigs move in. It is interesting to see how tiny the Squig Hoppers are compared to these gigantic bears. Even the Kislev dude bros on the back are like just probably the same size, honestly, standing on the ground as the goblins on the back of the Squigs, which is kind of hilarious. Arguably, maybe should count as infantry size. I don't know. That'd be interesting. Probably make them quite a bit stronger, because generally infantry-size cavalry speed is pretty good because they can kind of bypass the typical counters to mobility, which has generally been armor-piercing damage, right? I mean, hounds are not necessarily like absolute world beaters. You know, most hound-type units are good for their cost if used well, but can be very squishy. I feel like Squigs would probably be similar if they were counted infantry size. Not that I think they actually should, but it would be interesting, certainly. Squigs only technically have 2 legs as well, so there's that. So I guess that would apply to the lizard cavalry as well. Let's not think too much about internal consistency of logic. Such things do not apply in fantasy universes, of course. Other than the logic of Total War classically being, you know, flanking, leadership. Of course, some of the new mechanics bypass that, which is why I think, you know, the immune to flanking thing and the silence are both cool. The fact that they're actually implemented in the game, I guess, is cool, but I do think Creative Assembly needs to be very careful about how, when they use those, because they do kind of, again, bypass some of the fundamental mechanics of Total War that have been staples for gameplay. Flanking is sacrosanct almost in my book, right? Like, you should almost always be rewarded for it, so got to be very careful about that immune to flanking modifier and not just go throwing it around willy-nilly. I mean, right now, I think Bastillodon's got it, which is fine, I guess. It kind of makes sense to a degree. I mean, the thing is covered in armor all the way around, so... And, you know, with the tail swinging around and the legs, it seems like it's probably actively defending itself from all angles. I'm fine with that. Okay. Nerissa's a little bit tougher because it doesn't, I don't know, it's hard to come up with a reason why it makes sense, and it just seems very, very strong. So, I know I talked about that in a recent video, but I have to look. I don't think there are a lot of other sources for that immune to flanking, which is a good thing. Again, Creative Assembly needs to continue being very careful about how and when they use that. Same thing with silence. And I talked about Nerissa already, but she definitely needs her silence to be limited duration. That said, there are some other abilities which could qualify for silence if they were to be tweaked a bit. One such ability is like Arcane Unforging. It's definitely a good one. And I don't think, I mean, yeah, it'd be kind of hilarious if Sneaky Stealin', the lore attribute for Lore of Little Wa, would actually give like a very short duration, maybe like 5-second silence to all enemies map-wide. That would be insanely strong, but it would also be very funny. Contep's item, honestly, would probably actually be okay to do something like that, even though it would, again, be very frustrating, and high skill player could actually potentially use it to interrupt abilities in progress, right? Like if your opponent's casting a spell with a really long wind-up time, or a really long casting time, if you notice the template go down, Maybe you can cast Silence and interrupt. It's currently possible to do that also with the ability recharge timer effect. But again, very difficult to actually do in practice because cast times, I mean, long quote-unquote cast times are like 5 seconds, so it's generally quite tough. Anyway, the saga of this goblin is he's basically just been doing the true kite here, trying to, you know, bait and then escape from these warbear riders and Katarine. Slade has been doing an excellent job running around here, and now using the fungi to try and create a little bit of separation. That blinded debuff also means that if the Night Goblin Warboss goes for a couple of cheeky attacks here and there, could actually get some good damage in. Might have had a little bit of an opportunity there to do so with the Warbear Riders kind of separated, but chooses not to engage. And it's just going to kind of pull around once again, try and get those units out of position. Horse Archers also moving once again to try and shut down the artillery, but yeah, with the Kislev and Greenskin sort of line, multi-model troops for the most part being completely done. It's just up to the artillery and the single entities and these handful of Warbear Riders, I guess. Another ice sheet there. Yeah, honestly, Katarine right now, again, this is in the heat of the battle. It can be tough to know what's the right thing to do. In this position, you do have actually, Katarine could turn around and countercharge the Warboss and maybe get the Warbear Riders in behind him to block his avenue of escape. Maybe collapse on him. I mean, Slade's certainly a veteran player, could obviously take one of these other alternate avenues to escape, maybe screen actually with one of these artillery crews. Hard to say, but anyway. He's absolutely working this Night Goblin Warboss, working those tiny little squig legs as they gallop all around. Gallivant, even. Katarine, very slow as she's quite tired in the woods, as are the Warbear Riders. I mean, the Squig's reasonably slow as well, but do Squigs actually have Strider? No, they do not. That's fine. Anyway. Yeah. The Rock Lobbers, other artillery crews, once again being routed. Their leadership is obviously quite poor. They're just a bunch of goblins. But again, the separation means that Night Goblin Warboss is able to come in, get a few attacks in the rear of these Warbear Riders as they're cleaning up the artillery crews. Actually forces them into By Our Blood. Likely now to rout after that. We'll see. He did pop Spite of the Bad Mood once more for a little bit of anti-large. Gets a swing there to fell another unit model, or getting rear charged by Katarine. Once again, getting on the move to stay away from her, but didn't quite rout them off. They're down below 1,000 HP. Katarine's still 3,200, whereas he's only got 2,000 HP, so very dangerous situation. We're going to continue fast-forwarding as he continues kiting. And anyway, I guess my rant about those new ability modifiers being over. Yeah, I would like to see maybe silence on some maybe abilities and other spells and things that are kind of useless. We'll talk more about that, I guess, maybe a little bit today, maybe a little bit another time. I really need to sit down and look through some of the spell and ability lists again. Kind of think about what might be a good application. One interesting one would be to finally implement, I guess it would be a Scroll of Silence rather than a Dispel Scroll. It would be basically a one-time use scroll type item available to, I mean, if we're going by tabletop rules, it should be available to literally every single spellcaster, where you can actually maybe do a one-time use of silence specifically on an enemy spellcaster only, as sort of a, you know, like a stand-in for a Dispel Scroll. That's something that people have talked about for a long time, and it's never really been 100% I mean, I guess it's possible to implement. Again, the timing of it is really tough because you have to have an extremely fast reaction time. I mean, obviously, if you're playing in campaign even, you know, hitting the pause button will help, but you still have to notice the spell template and react within that, you know, like 2 to 5 second window tops. So rather than that, just having a silence at least gives you like a guaranteed like short period uptime of like, okay, during this critical part of the battle I can throw the silence out and you know, block any spells, AoE, whatever, from enemy spellcasters. I think it would be interesting, you know, certainly would be interesting to have in campaign, definitely would be interesting in multiplayer. Again, for all casters, just a one-time use, even if it's like 30 seconds, I mean, that can be pretty impactful, 15 to 30 seconds. Shutting down an opponent's spells, one of the cornerstones of Total War Warhammer specifically, and obviously what sets it apart from historical Total War. But anyway, Katarine cresting the hill here, seeking her quarry once more. We're going to fast forward as Slade's committed to chasing these Warbear riders off, as he should. The balance of power is not liking his chances right now. If we kind of size up the two combatants here, and keep in mind these stats are not 100% accurate because they're both exhausted, which is going to impact things. But, I mean, overall, Katarine's a pretty similar combatant. I mean, she does have Frostbite instead of Poison, which isn't going to directly affect combat other than debuffing speed. It does have more armor, and currently has about 500 more HP, so we'll see how this goes. I mean, they are pretty peer opponents. I would say it's going to come down to the ability usage, and we see just a nasty Tormentor Sword, a beautiful little tight cut here from Slade, and then drop the rear charge like right before it wears off. Just enough so that he actually does get on the side angle on that first attack. He's able to do a pretty good amount of damage, despite of the Bad Moon, of course. Juices that anti-large up, so he can, yeah, it's got that extra damage, up to 500 weapon strength as well. Only 16 bonus versus large, so the damage isn't that much extra, but the extra melee attack certainly helps. Stand your ground being popped by the Tsarina, put her up to 69 melee defense. Again, it's going to counteract that and bypass it even, but still, little Gabo bro is going to try and pull away here. Slade going for one more charge, trying to take advantage of that 65 charge bonus, as it is one advantage. Night Goblin War Boss has over Katarine. She pops by our blood, though, which is a good sign for him. He can probably just turn around and take this fight without having to worry about the charge bonus. Oh, maybe. Katarine kind of gets turned around a little bit there, and he gets just enough space to pop it. She also gets her charge bonus, though, as well, but let's see. I'm going to leave the health bars off now just to add some mystery to this absolute last battle here. Very appropriately in the ice and snow, mountains and woods. Tiny little goblin versus the literal ice queen. Yeah, it's going to go to the goblin, of course. Absolutely breathtaking. Just beautiful game. Has really everything you need. It's actually very close at the end of the day. Lots of memes. Fun stuff, new stuff, kind of, but not necessarily new like OP broken things, and just overall a fun time. I say new stuff, there's not really any direct new stuff. Like I said, just really juiced Little Grom, which actually didn't do all that well. What did well was the classic Warbear riders. I mean, obviously, they had their work cut out for them, having to go through hundreds and hundreds of squigs, who themselves proved to be reasonably cost-effective, actually, especially the squig hoppers. 1200 value on one of them is quite nice. The artillery quantity has a quality all of its own, and even though a lot of these don't pay for themselves, the Hammer of Gork does critically. Rock Lobber Regiment of Renown also applying that blinded debuff. Night Goblin Warboss over 2,000 damage value on him is fantastic. Actually quite good. Yeah, so overall, great job by Slade. Fun one from Grim here as well. Super close there at the finish. But yeah, all of his line troops pretty much got murderized. Obviously, the one cavalry unit he did bring was quite good at shutting down that artillery. Horse archers being very cost-effective, and then obviously the Warbear riders, as mentioned. Fun one, though, for sure. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that. If you do like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification. Every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.